Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and the toast begins now. While we're waiting for toast, we should probably discuss chapter 1023 of the aforementioned One Piece, which I would describe as quite pleasing in a holy crap, this is mind-blowing, I can't believe what I'm seeing kind of way. So the out-of-context summary for the chapter is as follows. What the crap? This chapter has left the One Piece fanbase in a jaw-dropping, eye-opening state of mind-blowage. Every part of the human body has been affected by 18 pages of black and white drawings. Drawings which happen to contain 3 Zoros, 2 Sulong Minks, and 1 massive Dragon Boy. Speaking of, Momonosuke is now 28 years old and is thus eligible to drink, vote, and most importantly, pay taxes. I bet you didn't think of that when you implemented this brilliant plan, did you? But a legitimately brilliant plan would be to subscribe to the Grand Line Review, which will result in consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed. And honestly, I can't think of anything more creative than that on this particular occasion because my head is still in a state of shock after reading this, but in conclusion, red button good, and pushing it is even better. Momonosuke's impending income issues aside, chapter 1023 was about as good of a chapter as One Piece as you could ever hope for. It had all of the primary things that we look for, one of which being fantastic action featuring both Zoro and Sanji, so it keeps both sides of that equation happy. And whilst this action is happening, there is a disgusting amount of deeper lore being dropped, once again incorporating both Zoro and Sanji, and thus also maintaining balance in the fanbase. And amongst everything, there are some nice moments of comedy to break everything up. So look, it was a pretty perfect experience. Wow, that was an experience. Like all of the hype aside, this was just a super fun chapter and very solid to read. Let's start with the basics though. One thing I love about chapter 1023 is that it gives us a taste of what I wanted last week. I said something along the lines about a desire of seeing Zoro and Sanji actually teaming up against King and Queen, and that is exactly what happened here. There's this wonderful sequence where Zoro saves Sanji from King and then Sanji repays the favor by saving Zoro from Queen. It's one of those situations where it just goes to show what a fantastic team they could be if they ever managed to, well, stop crapping on one another. And I'm very much hoping that this aspect continues because you would think that the wings of the Pirate King need to flap in tandem to be able to fly. Because if one is flapping differently to the other, then the Pirate King's just going to be zooming about in circles over and over and over. We're going to zero in on Sanji first though because his exploration ties into our big key world revelation. So initially I just have to ask, is Queen the first character in the entire series to actually question how Sanji's Diable Jumper works? I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure most people just respond to it with either stunned silence or ignore it completely before being promptly kicked in the face. So it may have taken 600 or so chapters since it was first used at any sobby, but I like that a character has finally thought to themselves, hey, you shouldn't be able to do that, you weird human. Which makes logical sense, but dialogue in a story generally serves a double purpose, the second of which is to convey an idea to the audience. And this definitely feels like Oda saying that we should be questioning Sanji's genetic heritage in some way, especially because Queen brings up the germal augmentations, and in his very next breath he also brings up the Lunarian race, and it is further implied that King is one of these Lunarians. And there's a lot to take in here. There is a lot to take in here. So this chapter has me wondering if Sanji did actually receive an augmentation that Sora's sacrifice did not stop, or if Sanji is the descendant of this newly highlighted race thing, or even if it's a mixture of both. And the reason why I would say both is because Judge is obviously one of the few people in this world who could comfortably scale the red line with his snail kingdom. So there is every chance that Judge encountered one of these beings, studied them, and either extracted or replicated a nice tight pair of fire conjuring genes and plonked them into his wife to craft designer babies. But it could also be more natural than that, and it seems to be implied, and I know I'm using the word implied a lot, and I will continue to, but to be fair, Oda is making a butt-ton of implications in this chapter. In any case, it seems to be implied that the Lunarians nation existed prior to Marie-Joie in a much more faraway past. And the wave of theories that is going to spawn from this chapter is just going to be wild. So what we have is evidence of an ancient kingdom populated by a race whose name has the Latin word for moon in it, a bunch of mysterious people in this world who have a half moon in their name, which we pronounce as a D, and one of those Ds is even capable of conjuring fire completely naturally through the Red Hawk technique. And I'm not going to dive into that kind of speculation too deeply. There are better and more theory enthusiastic channels out there to pick all of this apart, but my point is that this information brings up a whole new world of potential to exploring the history of One Piece. But I also did need to highlight Luffy because I know this chapter brings Sanji into question, but he's not the only one who can just burst into flames for the fun of it. There's also something very interesting going on with Sanji because he's pulled the old, oh, Mr. Zoro, I don't feel so good line as a result of the raid suit, which is great because it finally explains why Sanji isn't using it. It struck me as extremely weird that he ever took it off in the first place, as well as decided not to put it on again, especially when facing off against both King and Queen. But look, he's having some fun funny feelings. And I guess my personal hope is that donning the raid suit has unlocked some sort of hidden potential within Sanji, something that gives him the extra kick he needs to take down Queen. Moving to Zoro now though, it's hard to believe, but his developments are every bit as hype as Sanji's. It's actually a very unique chapter in that regard because firstly, we almost never examine Zoro's character, history, or heritage in any detail regardless, let alone in the very same chapter as that of another Straw Hat. But while he's off fighting King, we're making some very real connections here, with Kawamatsu and Hyogoro pointing out that Zoro's aesthetic and even personality contain similarities to not only Shimotsuki Ushimaru, but also Ryuma. There are like 3 different Zoros on this one page. It's almost like a multiverse meeting of Zoros. And for the first time in One Piece, we even get to see a full-on panel of non-zombie Ryuma. And I say One Piece because we do follow the actual Ryuma in Oda's Monsters one-shot, and there he does appear to be the spitting image of Zoro as well. By the way, Monsters is actually canon, weirdly enough, although we don't know exactly how long ago it took place in the world. So you may even end up in a situation where Ryuma lived during the Void Century, maybe even before, and could have had a connection to one Mr. Joy Boy, and that's how this whole Wano being important business began. It's just very interesting though, because just like Sanji, Kawamatsu and Hyogoro aren't saying this out of sheer curiosity, or I mean actually the characters, they might be, but Oda did not make space in this chapter for 2 people going, that's kind of cool, it's like the other thing, isn't it? Oda is telling us to start seriously questioning Zoro's heritage as well, and at this point, I'm definitely leaning towards him being a direct descendant of Ryuma. It's tricky though because the Shimotsukis, they're easy to mix up. The one being referenced in this chapter is Ushimaru, but the one who founded Shimotsuki Village in East Blue was Shimotsuki Kozaburo, and he was the father of Koshiro and the grandfather of Kuina. So if we were to take Zoro's lineage directly from Ushimaru, then we would be in a situation where Ushimaru's child or sibling went along with Kozaburo, and that would make Zoro and Kuina cousins of some sort, which would be interesting if only for the fact that it would actively destroy the canon of the anime, where they added all of that extra stuff about Zoro being like a traveling orphan, challenging dojos for lols. In the manga, none of that ever happened, and the earliest we see him as just being another kid at the dojo in the village. So if Zoro did have a direct connection to delicious Shimotsuki heritage, that might also explain why Koshiro gave him the Wado Ichimonji so easily. Because if Kuina can't use it, then, well, on to the next Shimotsuki child, I guess. And wouldn't it just be weird if we got to a stage where his name was revealed to be Shimotsuki Zoro? That would take some adjusting to. Like when Sanji's name was revealed as Vinsmoke, that threw me for about a year. And honestly, I'm only just now getting used to calling him Vinsmoke Sanji. It still feels a little weird and dirty. But that's what we have going on here. A chapter that explores the wings of the Pirate King, and implying that they both have a far deeper heritage than just a couple of schmucks that Luffy took a liking to along the way. And I'd actually be very, very keen to know what all of you feel about this, because I personally think that one of the most appealing of appeals of One Piece was following a band of absolute nobodies on their quest to make their dreams come true. And I'm not sure how to feel with the potential of knowing, oh, I guess they were all special all along, because it doesn't really sell the message of, anyone can do it if you want it bad enough, if most of our main characters were born into powerful families and had this guiding specter of inherited will paving their paths forward. Definitely doesn't give me hope for the future, unless I am secretly a prince or the descendant of a very powerful samurai. Still, I am loving this Zoro versus King fight, and I want to point out this wonderful pair of panels. Firstly, I love this classic Zoro shot. He always looks amazing when Oda has the camera angle looking down on him, because it properly showcases the depth of his swords. However, on this occasion, I am particularly impressed because of how well it blends in with the shot of King immediately to the left. It's really cool because your eye is drawn to Enma as the focal point of this panel, and then you follow its curves up and down until you land on King's head, which continues the curve flawlessly and seamlessly transitions us between the panels. It is a tiny, tiny minuscule feature, but it uses the sharpness of Enma to convey the sharpness of Oda's eye for page layout. And also, I want to examine this hilarious panel of King. King is just lying there contemplating his life like, dude, what happened today? Things were going so well, we were having a party, we killed Orochi, and we were going to slaughter everyone in the flower capital, and now everything is just ruined. Also, here's a fun thing. This chapter shows us, I believe for the first time, Queen using armament haki. And I know this because I recently recorded a video where I had to point out that we hadn't seen him use haki as of yet, so thank you very much, chapter 1023, for dating that video before it has has even come out. But wow, that's not even all this chapter had to offer, and we are going to head to the end now because adult Momo is in the house and he is looking pretty fierce as crap. Momo is looking pretty damn good. I'd be really keen to see how well he does in the next character poll because a brand new design will do him absolute wonders. The thing is, I know that this panel of Momo and Luffy is meant to make him look like a fearsome dragon, but is it bad that I still view him as kind of cute? Because yeah, he's a big scary dragon boy, rah rah, etc. But he still looks significantly smaller than Kaido's dragon form. So I guess Momo is a more sleek and economic version of Kaido. You know what this means though, right? We are going to have a dragon fight. Momonosuke versus Kaido, it is on. And yeah, Momo probably won't stand a chance, but I just can't wait to see these two dragons confront each other. Also, the great genius of this scene is that we have a character transformation that both reveals their new form, but simultaneously keeps it a secret. Because we only see the dragon form, which is a nice shot of hype, but we're left with the mystery of Momo's human form now. And I'm going to use that word again because I think it's being implied that Momonosuke now looks like his father Odin, because I'm not sure who else Shinobu would be referring to. I mean, maybe Kinemon actually. Perhaps Shinobu is actually crying tears of sadness because Momo is the spitting image of Kinemon instead of Odin. And you know what? It's One Piece, so I wouldn't count out some sort of hilarious stupid joke like that. But at this point, I think it's very unlikely. Wait. So consider this. Momonosuke, depending on his new form, now looks exactly like both Odin and Kaido. So what's going to happen is that Kaido is going to see himself. That's going to be very confusing. Then Momo will revert to his human form and Kaido is going to see Odin, and that's going to further mind crap him. And seriously, all we need is for the real Kozuki Odin to time travel and Kaido's mental breakdown will be complete. And whilst it is in classic Oda silhouette form, we can see that Momo looks quite toned and muscular in human form. So I'm assuming that Shinobu's devil fruit ages you, but in doing so, it assumes that you kept up with your fitness regime, which that could be quite beneficial. If this thing existed in real life, it might be tempting to ask Shinobu to age me by a couple of months or even a year, just to avoid all of that hard work. The more I think about it, the more sad I become though. This is a very heroic thing Momo is doing because he's just lost 20 years of his life. He has 2 decades less on this planet because of this decision, and as much as I've had issues with his stupid pervy nature in the past, this very much redeems him to me. And yet there is still another part of this chapter to discuss because we have something of a Zou-centric focus across a couple of pages, featuring Inuarashi, Nekomamushi, Zack, and Raizo. So these 5 or so pages are a pretty strong callback to those days, and it is almost euphoric, because now we are finally seeing the culmination of what was set up on that island all of those years ago. Inuarashi is in the process of dismantling Jack, whilst the one he suffered for, Raizo, is contributing in his own way by facing off against Fukurokuju. But with Jack in mind, I think it's also quite fun to point out that this is a chapter that features all of Kaido's top 3 in action. Now this may have happened before, but I can't recall a chapter off the top of my head which has shown King, Queen, and Jack all fighting at once, so this is a pretty big moment here. Forgetting the big mothers, the Fukurokujus, and the Perisperas of the world, we are seeing that last line of Beast Pirate defense crumbling before our eyes. And after that, it really is just going to be Kaido. We are getting so ridiculously close here, and just like with the Tobi Roppo matches, I would prepare for some very sudden conclusions happening within the next few weeks. At this rate, and given this may be too early to call, but the raid looks like it may conclude in early 2022. I don't think there's any chance we'll get there by the end of this year because there's only, somewhere between 10 to 12 chapters left. And there's all sorts of elements that could derail that timeline as well, like a potential Kaido flashback, Yamato flashback, or Toki involvement, any of that sort of stuff. But for the first time in this whole Wano arc, it really does feel like the end is in sight. And that's already giving me a preemptive wave of feels because I both desperately want and desperately do not want Wano to end. But if all of that wasn't enough, next up we have something pretty damn amazing to look at, because along with this chapter came part 1 of 3 connected color spreads featuring the top scorers of the World Top 100 Character Poll. After the poll ended, it was announced that Oda would create a color spread featuring the top 50 and also throwing in some others. It may be too early to call, but I already feel like this is going to be one of, if not my favorite color spread in the entire series. Oda has this disgusting talent for taking gigantic groups of characters, slapping them all in one image, and not having it turn into a complete mess. I really do shudder to think how long this overall image took to compose, because there is an absurd amount of thought that went into it. For example, my favorite part of this part is probably Law and Boa Hancock, because Hancock's heart fits perfectly within Law's fingers, which rather hilariously kind of makes it look like it's Law who's conjuring the heart. But this isn't just a case of sleek design, it's also an intentional idea. Because Law's character is so intrinsically connected to heart imagery. He's the captain of the Heart Pirates, his mentor figure's codename was Heart in Spanish, the Ope enemy is heart-shaped, and so on and so forth. So Oda has more or less taken two almost completely unrelated characters and perfectly fused their qualities in both an aesthetic and meaningful way. And that is just one example. There are so many more connections to be had here. There's a lot of purposeful grouping as well, although it is kind of weird that Oda decided to draw Odin twice. What's up with that? Meanwhile, the bottom left quarter is given to the Charlotte family for some of those Whole Cake Island vibes, and in the top right we have a great Thriller Bark reunion happening. Everything about this is so carefully and purposely constructed that it leaves me beyond eager to see the next two parts, especially because we do have a slight preview of what the next one will be. On the very right of the frame we can see what looks like Crocodile's sand as well as Sanji's leg. And speaking of Sanji, apart from that foot, there are no straw hats in this first part at all, and my assumption will be that they'll all be crammed into the middle section to take center stage, as they well should. And I'm not gonna lie, the thing I'm looking forward to most is seeing how Whoop Slap is somehow going to fit into all of this. He did make the top 50, so he will appear. Just on that top 50 business though, Oda is definitely adding in as many characters as he sees fit, because Gecko Moria, Bartholomew Kuma, Kaido, and Big Mom very notably did not make the top 50. However, I think it was the right decision to include them, because their presence does make this spread feel like a fairly epic summary of One Piece, so I definitely can't wait to see the rest. Just as you can't wait to see this next video, there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.